My wife Claire and I have been married for 15 years, and I believed we had a strong relationship. We have 2 kids, Jane, who's 13, and Martin, who's 10. I genuinely thought we were happy together. Claire works at a company and has been there for about 3 years now. Her boss, Andrew, is a man in his early 40s, who is also married with kids. About 2 weeks ago, Claire came home from work acting different, and I could tell something was weighing on her mind, but I didn't want to push her. She kept checking her phone more than usual, and would smile at it in a way that immediately made me suspicious, like she was sharing some private joke with someone. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said she was just tired from work. But her voice had a nervous edge I had never heard before. Last Tuesday, after the kids went to bed, she sat me down in our living room and said she wanted to talk about something important. My first thought was maybe someone had died or she was sick because her hands were shaking, and she kept fidgeting with her wedding ring. She took a deep breath and said she'd been thinking about our marriage and how we'd grown apart. She told me she wanted us to consider opening our relationship. I felt completely blindsided, and my mind went blank for a moment. I asked her what she meant by that, and she explained that she had developed feelings for someone else and thought we should explore having other relationships while staying married. The way she said someone else made it clear she already had a particular person in mind. My mind immediately went to her boss because of how much she'd been talking about him lately. When I asked her directly if it was her boss, Andrew, she got defensive and said it didn't matter who it was, that this was about our marriage and making sure we were both fulfilled. But her face turned red, and she couldn't look me in the eyes, which told me everything I needed to know. I told her that opening our marriage wasn't something I was interested in, and if she wanted to be with someone else, then we should get divorced. She immediately backtracked and said she didn't want a divorce, that she loved me, and wanted our family to stay together. But she also said she couldn't ignore these feelings she had. The whole time she was talking, I kept thinking how this all sounded like she'd already thought through every angle, and decided this was the best way to have her cake and eat it too. She kept saying things like we could set boundaries and rules and that lots of couples make this work. But all I could think about was how my kids would react if they found out their mum was dating another man while still being married to their dad. I asked her if she had already been physical with this person, and she swore she hadn't. But the way she hesitated before answering made me not believe her at all. The conversation went on for almost 2 hours, and by the end, I felt completely drained and confused. She was crying and saying she never meant for this to happen, and that she just wanted us both to be happy. But I kept thinking how this whole thing was really just her wanting my permission to cheat without consequences. I told her I needed time to think, and she said she understood. Then she hugged me and whispered that she hoped I'd consider it, because she really thought it could work. I barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about our entire relationship, and wondering if there were signs I missed. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She was making breakfast for the kids, and chatting about their school projects, as if we hadn't just had the most devastating conversation of our marriage. I spent the whole day at work unable to concentrate, and my coworker asked if I was feeling okay because I looked terrible. I wanted to tell someone what was happening, but I felt embarrassed and ashamed. Like maybe I wasn't enough for my wife, or that I'd failed as a husband somehow. When I got home that evening, Claire had made my favorite dinner, and was being extra affectionate, touching my arm while she talked, and laughing at things that weren't even funny. I could tell she was trying to butter me up, and it felt so manipulative and fake that I wanted to call her out on it immediately. During dinner, Jane asked why Mom seemed so happy, and Claire said she was just having a good day at work, which made me want to scream, because I knew exactly why she was having good days at work. After the kids went to their rooms, she brought up the conversation again, saying she'd been thinking about it all day, and truly believed this could strengthen our marriage. She showed me several articles on her phone about successful open marriages, and shared statistics on how many couples who try this end up happier. But while she was talking, all I could think about was how she was already emotionally cheating on me, and now wanted my blessing to make it physical. I finally told her I wasn't going to agree to an open marriage, and that if she wanted to pursue someone else, then we needed to separate. She started crying again, and said I was being and that I wasn't even trying to consider alternatives. Then she said something that really hit me. She thought I'd be more understanding since I'd always supported her career and ambitions. The way she tried to frame wanting to sleep with her boss as some kind of career ambition made me realize she was either completely delusional or thought I was stupid. I told her I was going to stay at a XYZ hotel about 20 minutes away for a few days to clear my head. She panicked and said that was an overreaction and that we should keep talking about it, but I was done talking because every word that came out of her mouth made me more convinced. She'd already made up her mind about what she wanted to do. I packed a bag while she followed me around the house, begging me not to leave and saying we could work this out if I just gave her a chance to explain better. She kept saying she loved me and that this didn't change anything between us. But I kept thinking, you don't ask to sleep with other people if you truly love your spouse. The kids were upstairs doing homework, completely unaware that their parents' marriage was falling apart right below them. I kissed them goodnight and told them I had to go out of town for work for a few days, which felt horrible because I hate lying to them, but I couldn't tell them the truth. Jane asked if everything was okay because Mum looked upset, and I just said Mum was tired and that everything would be fine, even though I had no idea if anything would ever be fine again. I drove to the hotel and checked in, feeling like I was in a dream the whole time. I sat on the bed in that room and tried to process what had just happened to my marriage and family. And I kept coming back to the same question. How long had this been going on without me knowing? About an hour after I checked in, there was a knock at my door, and I knew it was Clare before I even looked through the peephole. She was standing there crying, her makeup smeared, and said we needed to talk, that I couldn't just run away from this. I let her in because I didn't want to cause a scene in the hallway, but I immediately regretted it. She launched into a speech about how she'd made a mistake bringing this up and didn't really want an open marriage. Then she said she couldn't promise that her feelings for this other person would just go away and maybe we could find a compromise that worked for both of us. I asked what kind of compromise she had in mind. She said maybe she could have just an emotional relationship with him, but stay physically faithful to me, which made me laugh out loud because it was such a ridiculous idea. I told her she was already having an emotional affair and that asking for permission to continue, it wasn't a compromise at all. She got angry and said I was being unfair and that she'd been honest with me about her feelings instead of cheating like many others would. The fact that she thought she deserved credit for telling me she wanted to cheat instead of doing it behind my back showed me how far gone she already was. We argued for another hour, and she kept trying different angles to convince me this could work. But every suggestion made it clearer she'd already decided she wanted to be with this guy, and was just trying to find a way to do it without losing her comfortable life with me. Finally, I told her she needed to leave and that I'd call her tomorrow to talk about next steps. She cried and begged, saying she couldn't lose me and the kids. But when I asked if she was willing to cut off all non-work contact with her boss and transfer to a different department, she said that wasn't fair and she shouldn't have to sacrifice her career. That's when I knew for sure she'd already chosen him over our marriage, and everything else was just her trying to have it both ways. I'm writing this from my hotel room, because I can't sleep and don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to fight for our marriage, but another part feels it's already over and that I'm only delaying the inevitable. I keep thinking about my kids and how this will affect them, wondering if I should try to make this work for their sake. But I also don't want them to grow up thinking this kind of relationship is normal or healthy. I guess I'm just looking for advice from people who might have gone through something similar or who can help me see this situation more clearly. Right now, I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down, and I don't know which way is up anymore. Update 1. 2 months later, I thought I should update everyone on what's happened since my original post. Thank you to everyone who commented and messaged me with support. Did really helped during what has been the worst 2 months of my life. After I posted originally, I stayed at that hotel for a week while Claire and I tried to figure out what to do. We had several more conversations, and she kept insisting she wanted to save our marriage. But every time I brought up her cutting contact with Andrew, she would find reasons why that wasn't possible or fair. She said they worked too closely together, that it would be obvious to everyone if she suddenly started avoiding him, and that she couldn't risk her job over this. I told her she should have thought about that before developing feelings for her married boss, but she said I was being unreasonable and that people can't control who they have feelings for. Eventually, I moved back home because I missed my kids and because staying in a hotel definitely wasn't sustainable. But I made it clear to Claire that we were separated, even though we were living in the same house. We told the kids that Mum and Dad were going through a difficult time, but that we both loved them very much. I could see how confused and scared they were. Even though they didn't fully understand what was happening, Claire kept trying to act normal around the kids and suggested family activities like movie nights or going out to dinner, but everything felt forced and awkward. I found myself watching her constantly for signs she was still in contact with Andrew, and I hated how paranoid and suspicious I'd become, but I couldn't help it. She would still check her phone obsessively and take calls in private, and when I asked about it, she said it was just work stuff. But her defensive tone told me otherwise. About 3 weeks ago, Claire came home from work looking upset, and I could tell something had happened. She was quiet during dinner and kept glancing at me like she wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. After the kids went to bed, she asked if we could talk. My first thought was maybe Andrew had left his wife for her and she was going to ask for a divorce. But instead, she told me she'd been fired from her job. My brain couldn't process what she was saying at first. I asked what happened, and she started crying, saying she'd made a mistake, and that Andrew had reported her to HR for inappropriate behavior. She said she tried to talk to him about their relationship, and he completely rejected her, saying he was committed to his marriage, and that what she was suggesting was inappropriate. It simply meant Andrew wasn't actually interested in her, and she'd basically destroyed our marriage for someone who didn't even want her. She'd thrown away our 15-year marriage for a fantasy that was never real in the first place. I asked exactly what she'd said or done to get fired, and she was vague. But from what I pieced together, she'd basically confessed her feelings to him and suggested they pursue a relationship. She kept saying she'd made a terrible mistake and now realized what we had was more important than some stupid crush. But I couldn't get past the fact that she was willing to blow up our entire family for a man who was never truly available or interested. The next few weeks have been incredibly difficult because Claire is dealing with being unemployed and rejected, and she seems to expect me to comfort her and help her through this crisis she created herself. She keeps saying things like she can't believe she was so stupid and that she should have appreciated what she had with me. But every time she talks about it, I can tell she's more upset about Andrew rejecting her than about potentially losing our marriage. What's been especially difficult is that she's been accusing me of being selfish for not offering more support during this tough time. Last week, I went on a skiing trip with my brother that we'd planned months ago. When I returned, Claire was furious, saying she couldn't believe I'd abandoned her when she needed me the most. She said it was cruel of me to go enjoy myself while she was dealing with the consequences of losing her job, and that a good husband would have cancelled his trip to be there for his wife. I told her I wasn't her husband in any meaningful way anymore since she had made it clear she wanted to be with someone else, and that I wasn't responsible for comforting her through the fallout of her own choices. But she said that was exactly the kind of selfish thinking that had driven her to look for emotional connection elsewhere in the first place, which made me so angry I had to leave the room before I said something I'd regret. The worst part is that our kids are starting to get involved in ways that make me feel terrible. Jane asked me the other day why I wasn't being nicer to Mum when she's obviously sad about losing her job. And Martin has been asking if we're getting divorced because some kid at school said his parents fought a lot before they split. Claire has been crying in front of them more often, and I can see how much it's affecting them. I know they think I'm being mean to their mum during a hard time. Yesterday, Jane actually confronted me and said that Mum told her she lost her job because of office politics and that she needs our support right now. She said she didn't understand why I was being so cold to her. I wanted to tell Jane the truth about why her mum really lost her job. But I also knew it would be unfair to put that burden on a 13-year-old girl, so I just said that sometimes adult relationships are complicated and that I'm doing my best to figure things out. Then Jane said, maybe I should try harder because Mum is really sorry about whatever she did wrong and that everyone deserves a second chance. Hearing my daughter defend her mum and basically ask me to forgive her for trying to cheat on me with her boss was one of the most heartbreaking moments of this whole ordeal. I know Jane has no idea what she's really asking me to forgive, but it still feels like everyone expects me to just get over this and move on. Claire has started talking about going to marriage counseling and says she's willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our relationship. But I can't shake the feeling she's only saying this because her plan to be with Andrew fell apart so spectacularly. If he had been interested in her, I'm convinced she would have asked for a divorce without hesitation. Now she wants me to pretend like none of this happened just because her backup plan is to stay with me. I've been thinking about filing for divorce, but I keep hesitating because of how it would affect the kids. My brother thinks I should divorce her and says what she did is unforgivable, regardless of whether she physically cheated or not. But my sister thinks I should try counseling for the sake of the kids. Honestly, I'm not sure what the right answer is. I feel stuck in this horrible limbo where I can't move forward. But I also can't go back to the way things were before. I know I need to make a decision soon because this limbo isn't fair to anyone. I just wish I knew how to tell the difference between genuine remorse and regret that her plan didn't work out the way she hoped. Update 2. 3 months later, I've been putting off writing this update because I knew it would make everything feel more real, but I think I owe it to everyone who's been following my story to let you know what's happening. The support from this community has meant more to me than you could possibly know, especially during moments when I felt like I was going crazy or being unreasonable. After my last update, I spent a lot of time thinking about what kind of life I wanted for myself and my kids. I realized I couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty and resentment. Claire continued to push for marriage counseling and kept talking about how we could rebuild our relationship stronger than before, but every conversation felt like she was trying to convince me to forget something I'm never going to be able to forget. The breaking point came about a month ago when I found out Claire had been in contact with Andrew even after getting fired. I discovered this completely by accident when her laptop was open on the kitchen counter and a notification popped up from a messaging app I didn't recognize. I knew right away this was bad news. She wouldn't switch to a different app just to talk to her sister or friends. When I opened it, I found weeks of messages between her and Andrew. I took photos on my phone in case they might help me later in the divorce. Most of the messages were her apologizing for what happened at work and trying to convince him that what she felt was real and worth exploring, while he repeatedly told her to stop contacting him and that he wasn't interested. But what really hurt me was that she was still pursuing him even while telling me she wanted to save our marriage, and that he didn't mean anything to her anymore. I confronted her about it that night. She initially tried to deny it, but when I showed her the messages, she broke down and admitted she'd been trying to keep some kind of connection with him. She said she knew it was wrong but couldn't just turn off her feelings and thought maybe if she could get closure with him, she'd be able to fully commit to our marriage again. That's when I knew for certain our marriage was over. Because even after losing her job and facing divorce, she was still more invested in chasing Andrew than fixing what she'd broken with me. I told her I was done trying to make this work and that I would be filing for divorce. The look of shock on her face told me she genuinely thought I'd keep waiting around indefinitely while she sorted out her feelings. Last week, I finally met with a divorce attorney and started the paperwork. Yesterday, I told Claire in person that I'd officially begun divorce proceedings. I waited until the kids were at school because I knew she'd react emotionally, and I didn't want them to witness it. When I told her, she immediately started crying and begging me to reconsider, saying she'd do anything to save our marriage and that she'd been an idiot to throw away what we had. She kept saying Andrew meant nothing to her and that she'd been confused and going through some kind of midlife crisis. But now she knew I was the only man she wanted to be with. What broke my heart was when she asked what she was supposed to tell the kids about why their family was falling apart. I saw genuine panic in her eyes about having to explain this to Jane and Martin. I told her we'd figure out how to tell them together. But we weren't going to lie about why we were getting divorced even if we didn't give them all the details. She begged me to think about how this would affect the kids and said maybe we could try separating for a while instead of going straight to divorce. But I reminded her that we'd essentially been separated for months and that nothing had changed except she'd continued lying to me. I told her I wanted our kids to see what a healthy relationship looks like, and that staying in a marriage where one person tried to cheat wasn't a good example for them. The hardest part was when she asked if there was anything she could do to change my mind. I saw genuine desperation in her eyes. For a moment, I almost wavered because I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago beneath all the lies and manipulation. But I told her the person I married wouldn't have done any of this over the past few months, and I didn't know who she was anymore. I knew she wasn't someone I could trust with my heart or future. She cried harder and said people make mistakes and marriage is supposed to be about forgiveness and working through hard times together. But I said what she did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices that showed me where her priorities really were. The conversation lasted almost 3 hours, and by the end, we were both emotionally drained. She asked if there was any chance we could reconcile in the future after she'd worked on herself and proven she'd changed. I told her honestly that I couldn't see myself ever trusting her again and that I needed to focus on moving forward rather than holding on to hope for something that probably would never happen. We still haven't told the kids about the divorce, because we're trying to figure out the right way to do it, and Claire keeps hoping I'll change my mind if we wait a little longer. But I know delaying the conversation will only make things harder for everyone. Jane and Martin deserve to know what's happening. Even if the truth is painful and confusing, I know the next few months will be incredibly difficult as we navigate the divorce process and figure out custody arrangements and how to co-parent effectively. I also feel like I'm finally taking control of my life again instead of just reacting to whatever crisis Claire creates next. My lawyer says the divorce should be relatively straightforward since we agree on most of the major issues, but I know that could change if Claire decides to fight it. The kids are going to struggle with this, and I hate that they're going to be hurt by their mum's choices. But I also think they'll be better off in the long run seeing their parents in healthy relationships rather than watching us pretend what we have is normal or sustainable. I'm planning to start therapy to help me process everything that's happened and to make sure I'm handling the divorce and co-parenting in the healthiest way possible. I never thought I'd be a 38-year-old divorced dad, but I'm trying to focus on building a good life for myself and my kids rather than dwelling on how different things are from what I expected. Thank you again to everyone who's offered support and advice during this incredibly difficult time in my life. Final update. Several months later, I wanted to write one final update to close out this chapter of my life, since so many of you have been following along and offering support throughout this ordeal. It's been almost 8 months since my original post, and 6 months since I filed for divorce. And I'm happy to say, the divorce was officially finalized last week. The process ended up being more complicated than my lawyer initially expected, because Claire went through several phases of back and forth, even after we agreed, before trying to contest different aspects of the divorce. But eventually, we reached an agreement that works for everyone involved. We're sharing custody of Jane and Martin, with them staying with me during the week and spending weekends with Claire, which seems to be working well for the kids so far. Telling the kids about the divorce was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. We decided to be honest with them about the fact that their mum had developed feelings for someone else, and that we couldn't work through our differences. Jane took it really hard at first, and blamed me for not being willing to forgive her mum, but over time, she started to understand that some things can't be fixed just by saying sorry. Martin was confused more than anything and kept asking if there was something he could do to make Mum and Dad love each other again, which absolutely broke my heart. Both kids have been seeing a counselor who specializes in helping children cope with divorce, and they seem to be adjusting better than I expected, given how much their world has been turned upside down. Claire struggled significantly with the divorce, both emotionally and financially, and there were several points where she tried to use the kids to guilt me into reconsidering. She would tell them things like how sad she was living alone in her apartment, or how much she missed being a family. For a while, Jane was asking me almost daily if there was any chance we might get back together someday. I had to have some difficult conversations with both kids about how sometimes parents make choices that hurt their families, and that even though Mum and Dad both love them very much, we can't be married to each other anymore. I tried to be honest without saying anything that would damage their relationship with their mum, which was a delicate balance I'm still trying to maintain. The whole process was hard watching Claire spiral for a few months after the divorce was finalized. She had trouble finding a new job since being fired from her previous company, and I think the reality of losing both Andrew and our marriage hit her harder than she expected. There were a few times when she called me crying and asking if we could try again, and I had to keep reminding her too much had happened for us to go back to the way things were. About 3 months ago, Claire finally found a new job, and she seems to be doing better both professionally and emotionally. She's been more stable during our interactions, and has stopped making comments about reconciling, which has made co-parenting much easier for everyone involved. The kids have adjusted to our new routine. While they still express sadness about our family being different now, they seem to be thriving in their own ways. As for me, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life and figuring out who I am as a single dad. I started going to therapy about 4 months ago, which has been incredibly helpful in processing everything that happened and learning how to trust my own judgment again. I realized I'd spent so much time questioning whether I was being reasonable or fair, that I lost sight of the fact that Claire's behavior was genuinely unacceptable, regardless of her motivations. I'm not dating anyone yet, because I want to focus on my kids and on healing from everything that happened. But I feel hopeful about the possibility of finding love again someday with someone who truly wants to be with me. Thank you to everyone who followed my story and offered advice and support during the darkest period of my life. I know there are others going through similar situations who might be reading this, and I want them to know that it's possible to get through something like this and come out stronger on the other side, even when it feels impossible in the moment.